A laboratory should be a safe place to work, not only for the teachers, but also for the students. When working in the laboratory, there is always a risk that an experiment may go wrong. Everyone in the laboratory must respect the need for safety. And for this presentation, I am going to give you a lab safety orientation. And what are the things that you need to know? What can you say about this picture? The students are doing different tasks, but some, as you may see, are not doing what is they are expected to do. Some, or one student here, is doing horseplay. The other one is eating. The girl on the other side is sitting near a Bunsen burner, and her hair is not tied back. There's also some students who follow lab safety guidelines, like some of the students are wearing laboratory apron or safety goggles. In the Philippines, we are given directives from the Department of Education, and it is under the Department Order 48, Series 2006, Observance of Safety Measures in Science Laboratories. There are different laboratory standards, but basically, one should know and practice proper behavior, understand the potential danger in conducting experiments, and prepare for emergency situations that may occur. And the laboratory standards consist of 5 major elements. These are risk management, hazard identification, chemical hygiene plan, laboratory safety and control, standards, procedures, and document control, emergency response procedure. For the laboratory standards, we are given standard designs on how you put up your science laboratory. This is what we call laboratory setup, where you put, for example, in one room, you will put all the materials there for biology lab. There is also one room for a chemistry lab or a physics lab. And also, for each room should contain or should have installation of laboratory safety equipment. What are these lab safety equipment? These are the fire extinguisher, fire blanket. You also have there your first aid cabinet, a pail of sand, which is very important in case of chemical spills. And you may also ask for an installation of eye wash, emergency eye wash and shower. Of course, we also require students to have their own personal protective equipment, which includes the lab apron, laboratory gown, the safety goggles, and their and if the students are working in a biology lab, they are also required to use safety gloves. Okay. We also have the chemical hygiene plan, which includes list of dangerous chemicals, also list of incompatible chemicals. When we say dangerous chemicals, these are the volatile ones, the explosive ones, and then the incompatible is the one that you don't mix two chemicals with each other, of course, because of violent reaction. Safety hazards, this includes electrical, mechanical, fire hazards, and chemical hazards. And then next is the waste disposal. In case of laboratory breakage, there should be a specific waste bin for the broken glasswares. And then you also need to have a chemical waste jar. Usually you can use amber bottles or the clear ones. Just put it in a tray and put a label in it, and then make sure that you mark and label each chemicals that you are placing inside the jar. Use and cleaning of glasswares. This is very important. Of course, to avoid contamination. Next is lab safety equipment. This is very important. The student should know the location of the following. Now, where you place the fire extinguisher, the first aid cabinet or kits, the fire blanket, exit points. In case of fire, where should you go? Where should you run? And then emergency eye wash and shower, waste disposal container for broken glassware, solid waste, and chemical. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the personal protective equipment is very important. Installation of emergency eye wash and emergency safety shower is also very important for you to have in a science lab in case of emergency. Fire extinguisher. A student, it is advisable that a teacher or laboratory assistant should give an orientation on how to extinguish a fire or use a fire extinguisher. Now, there are different types of fire extinguisher, but what we are using commonly inside the science laboratory are the ones which are pressurized dry chemical, which is type BC or ABC, and carbon dioxide. And there's an acronym in using fire extinguisher. We call that the PASS rule, PASS, which summarizes the operation of a fire extinguisher. Like P is for pull the pin, A is for aim, extinguisher nozzle at the base of the fire, S is for squeeze the trigger while holding the extinguisher upright, and then S is for sweep the extinguisher from side to side, cover the fire with the spray. If your clothing catches fire, do not run. What you need to do is you stop, you drop and roll. Drop to the floor and roll slowly on the ground to smother the flame and ask for help to get the fire blanket. Or assign someone in the station near the fire blanket to grab it as soon as there is an ongoing fire hazard. And to use a fire blankets have two main purposes. First, to stop flames of a burning substance, and secondly, for a person whose clothing is on fire. As you well know, we don't use fire extinguisher to people. Okay, what you're going to do is you open the blanket fully, wrap around to the person to seal the fire from air. Do not use fire extinguisher on a person because serious chemical reactions or frostbite may result from such use. Okay, working in the lab, you should ask yourself essential questions. What are the possible dangers of this experiment? What are the potential hazards of the materials that I will be using? such as corrosive properties, chemical reactions, flammability, and toxicity. It is also very important that the teacher should give a pre-lab discussion. During the pre-lab discussion, she or he will give a copy of the lab sheet and present it and discuss it to the class. Okay, so the students will ask themselves, what else can possibly go wrong? Have I checked the electrical equipment if you're using microscopes or other laboratory equipment that needs electricity? Check the cords for tattered wiring and minor defects. Number 5, have I inspected the equipment or apparatus for any damage? Am I prepared to deal with the things that can go wrong? Do I have my personal protective equipment? And am I aware of the location of the first aid cabinet, fire blanket, fire extinguisher, fire exit, emergency eye wash, and shower? And am I aware of the risk in working in the laboratory? And do I practice lab safety? Safety in the chemistry lab. You study your laboratory activity before coming to the lab. Eating or drinking is not allowed in the laboratory. You don't want your food to be contaminated, or if you're culturing media, you don't, of course, you want your environment to be sterile. Wear the prescribed personal protective equipment. Long hair must be tied back. Locate safety equipment. Do not perform experiment without the permission of your teacher. You are not allowed to work in the laboratory alone. Never work alone. And use all lab fixtures properly. What are these fixtures? Yung water, the water outlet, electrical outlet, gas outlet. Next, safety in the chemistry laboratory, of course, is very important. You read the labels carefully. If you're holding chemical jars containing, of course, chemicals or agents, you read the label, read the precautionary measure. Okay? Smell cautiously. Many substances in the lab are toxic. Check others only if instructed. Do so by wafting. You never taste a substance. You don't touch any chemicals. You use a scrupula or a spatula. And be careful with flames. If you're using a lighted Bunsen burner or alcohol lamp, that can be a major fire hazard if not attentively used. Be careful with glasswares. Check for cracks or chips. You don't pour water into acid. Pour acid into water. Clean up spilled chemicals. Notify your teacher, lab assistant. If in case of chemicals spilled on the skin, you wash it for at least 15 minutes with soap and water. Chemical burns from strong acid or base. Use the emergency shower for at least 10 minutes. You wash your hands after working with chemicals. Cleanliness in the laboratory is a must. After working in the lab, you clean your workstation. You avoid doing anything that will lead to contamination of reagents. You practice the habit of rinsing droppers and steering rods immediately after use. You use your waiting time. For example, you're heating solutions. You clean your glasswares or check your data. Proper disposal of waste chemicals must be observed. You ask your teacher where the waste jars are. Ask permission before you leave the laboratory. Inform your teacher, laboratory assistant, so she can inspect your work area. What do you mean by chemical hygiene plan? The chemical hygiene plan, the purpose of it is to provide guidelines for prudent practices and procedures for the use of chemicals in the laboratory. The laboratory standard requires that the CHP set forth procedures, equipment, PPE, and work practices are being observed by the people working in the laboratory. In terms of chemical safety, of course, we check on the explosion hazards, the potentially explosive combination of common reagents, examples of incompatible chemicals, the reactive hazards, examples of chemicals which burn or stain the skin, and then examples of volatile substances. This is a poster of the globally harmonized system pictograms. There are 9 pictograms given by the GHS, or the globally harmonized system. This is an internationally recognized system for hazard classification and communication. There's where you can see a flame over circle. That is an oxidizer. If you get to see a flame, that is, of course, it's flammable. And then there's exploding bomb, skull and crossbones, which means acute toxicity. Corrosives, gas cylinder, which means gases under pressure. Health hazards, if it's carcinogenic or toxic, respiratory sensitizers. And then there's the environment, of course, if it's toxic, if the substance will be exposed to or released to the environment. And then that's the exclamation mark, which means it's an irritant. Okay. And these are different types of chemical hazard symbols: flammable, explosive, toxic, poison, corrosive, irritant, environmental. Okay. Reasons for proper waste disposal. Hazardous chemicals down the drain can lead to pollution of groundwater, lakes, rivers, etc. So plants and animals will die if they are exposed to hazardous chemical waste. And then serious health problems will become present in people if hazardous waste find its way into drinking water. Of course, you don't want to see your vegetables glowing, right? Or if you're taking a shower and then after doing that, you'll be like person glowing in the dark. So do not dispose your chemicals into the drain. Okay, for each laboratory's system, each university school, they have their own system of borrowing materials. Okay, borrowing procedure and use of materials. There is what we call a form, which is a material requisition form, if you are borrowing materials in the lab. You fill up a form and then you submit it to the teacher. You specify the name of the experiment or research, then schedule the quantity and specification of the materials are you borrowing or will be using in that particular experiment. And then chemicals or reagents will only be given during the laboratory schedule. Reservation policy. In case that you are working on a research, a student is allowed to work on special cases as deemed reasonable by the teacher. She must accomplish a reservation form assigned and approved by the teacher. Do not work alone. Request permission to your teacher about the schedule you will work on your experiment. Use of gadget or mobile phones in the laboratory. Yes, we allow students for documentation purposes, for recording, if it is only needed in the activity. So a student must accomplish a permit to use gadget a gadget form signed by the subject teacher. Okay, in case of breakage, loss, and damage to lab equipment, any incident or breakage, loss, or damage to any laboratory apparatus or equipment must be reported immediately to the laboratory instructor. The student has an option to pay or replace the broken, lost, or damaged apparatus or equipment before the end of the term. This is part of the student's clearance. Okay. Payments are made at the cashier's office. Present receipt for lab clearance. There is also an option that the student can purchase the material from outside and then just replace the item with the same specification. Okay. This is very important. The student safety contract. This is an example of a contract. There is the teacher's name, the student's name, and then the date. And then the students will be asked to tick each box. And then the student has received the specific instruction regarding the use, function, and location of the following. Like personal protective equipment, we check that. Water, gas, and electrical source. emergency eye wash and shower, fire blanket, fire extinguisher, first aid cabinet, heat source using hot laser burners, chemical safety, waste disposal containers for glass, chemicals, and consumables. So when you're giving lab safety orientation, you cover everything up so that after you issue a safety contract to the student, they will be able to check each box because you really gave an orientation about all these things. Okay. The student will abide by the safety manual for science laboratories to prevent accidents and injury to herself and others, and will follow all additional instructions given by the teacher. Conduct herself in a responsible manner at all times in the laboratory. So list below any special allergies or sensitivities, like for example, plants, animals, pollen, foods, chemicals, these things that may affect the student's safety in the laboratory. Check another box if the student wears contact lenses. Okay, this is a template of how you're going to do with the student statement and the parents or guardian statement. So a teacher may require a student to submit this the next meeting with the signature of the parent and the students. This will also serve as a clearance for the student. Thank you. I hope that this presentation will give you guidance and it may serve its purpose of giving you an orientation. Thank you for dropping by.